Okay, wonderful. Welcome, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here with you today, opening this session on federal investments to accelerate research at the intersection of geoscience and health science. My name is Susan Annenberg, and I'm the chair of the Environmental and Occupational Health Department at the George Washington University Milken Institute School of Public Health. I'm very excited to be co-hosting this event through my hat as the president of the GeoHealth section of the American Geophysical Union, in partnership with Greg Wallenius from Boston University through his role as a leader in the NSF-funded GeoCAFE Research Coordination Network. We also want to thank the NIH Climate Change and Health Initiative for their support of the CAFE Research Coordinating Center, and also the new center that I lead, the Research and Engagement for Action in Climate and Health, or REACH Center. Both of these centers are also co-sponsors of today's events. We could not be doing this without our moderator and panelists, and you'll see the agenda here on the screen. I want to thank my co-organizers, Greg Wallenius, Jen Stowell, Lily Nichols, Katie O'Donnell, Sloan Hurst, and everyone else who contributed to organizing today's important event. It's really an important moment in climate and health, considering that the effects of climate change are already being felt, particularly among vulnerable communities. Whether it's through wildfire smoke, heat waves, storms and related flooding, many of us have been impacted by climate change already. And if we haven't been yet, we know people who have been. And it's really more important than ever to ensure that the research initiatives supported by the federal government meet this moment and reach across disciplines to address these complex problems. Our federal agency partners have made really wonderful progress in finding avenues to collaborate in the intersecting spaces of their missions at the nexus of climate and health and geoscience and health sciences more broadly. And I'm really looking forward to hearing more about that here. I want to acknowledge that we're in a state of flux, and we'll continue to revisit this topic with future webinars and events as things evolve. But I'm really looking forward to the discussion here today that will highlight some of the avenues for partnership that our federal agency partners have found. And there will be plenty of opportunities to hear from many agencies and ask questions as well. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Lynn Goldman, who is the Michael and Lori Milken Dean of the Milken Institute School of Public Health at George Washington University. Dean Goldman is a pediatrician and epidemiologist. She's a member of the National Academy of Medicine, and she's also a former assistant administrator for toxic substances at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, where she oversaw the Office of Chemical Safety and Pollution Prevention. She's a renowned expert in pediatric environmental health, and I'm fortunate that she's my boss, and we're all fortunate to be able to hear her perspectives today about the importance of research at the intersection of environment and health. So Dean Goldman, over to you.
And thank you so much, Susan, for that introduction. And I should say I am fortunate to be Susan's dean. But I'm going to give kind of a long view of this issue. I think we all know that climate change and environmental hazards have a profound impact on human health, even today, and by any predictive methodology, worsening in the future. But also, this has been all too predictable for a very, very long time. When I was a college student at UC Berkeley in the mid-1970s, I was lucky to be enrolled in the Conservation of Natural Resources program at Berkeley. This was one of the nation's first interdisciplinary environmental studies programs. And in that program, I was able to develop my interest in environmental health. But one of the most memorable, and I think one of the first aspects of our introductory course was that they taught us about the increases in atmospheric CO2 that were already being measured on Mauna Loa and the relationship between those emissions and the average temperature of the planet. And I suppose we could have just stopped there. I mean, at that time in the 70s, we already knew that carbon dioxide emissions could cause climate change. Why would we continue to research that? But of course, there are tremendous benefits in continuing to learn more, including that we now identify many other pollutants that are contributing to the problem, especially methane. And of course, the more we learn, the more we appreciate the interconnectivity between this pollution and all else on this planet, including our health, but also the health of all other species and the stability of ecosystem functions that actually sustain life on Earth. So, of course, the research is very much worthwhile. When it comes to health and climate, we are in reality at a very early stage in understanding the impacts of climate change on human health and what we can do about them. In the 1960s, René Dubos stated that measures of environmental health are expressions of the success or failure experienced by the human organism in its efforts to respond adaptively to environmental challenges. We now recognize that these impacts are inextricably intertwined with the health of all other species on our planet and the ability of all species to adapt to environmental changes, whether from climate change, toxics, pesticides, or air pollution. A parallel in my life was the recognition by many, also decades ago, that children can be disproportionately susceptible to many environmental risks due to their relatively high intake rates of anything, air, food, water, and the precariousness of many developmental processes that are, of course, underway when we're young. One could have just stopped there, but today, this is one of the most active areas in environmental research, and new insights are unfolding, as well as the recognition of new hazards to all of us as a result. As well as, by the way, finally, insights about how changes in climate are affecting the health of our children as well as their mental health. So just such, I've witnessed in my lifetime this explosion of research on child health and the environment, and I believe that just such an explosion is underway for climate and health, perhaps beginning with the establishment of centers that begin to bring people together within institutions, across disciplines, across schools, across our country. But really, we're only at the beginning of a time when we understand what is unfolding, what we can anticipate in the future, and what we can do to maintain the health of people as well as the other species on our planet. So in closing, I appreciate the opportunity to share my reflections also on educating in this area. And I will say in public health and educating about climate and health, we're wrestling with the competencies that should be provided to our students at all levels. We even sometimes have debates about what to call it. Should we call it geohealth, climate and health, One Health, planetary health, ecosystem health? All of these concepts are important. And I think more important than what we call it is that we are conveying enough knowledge to our students that they actually understand that we have to take a systems approach to being able to understand all of environmental health, but particularly these issues around these transformations that are happening with our planet. What we've been, I think, even slower to understand is that interdisciplinary education does not mean that our students will be challenged to be competent in every single area related to climate and health. I do not expect one of my graduates to be an expert simultaneously in respiratory health and measuring air pollution and modeling air pollution, in doing health communications, in policy development, in the law and the structures of the law around control of these and all the rest of that. What I do hope is that educationally we can develop people who are strong contributors in any relevant field, whether that is political science, environmental economics, behavioral science, environmental epidemiology and toxicology, or data science, and this is the key part, who understand how to work well in interdisciplinary collaborative teams who have similar strengths in their own areas. How do we learn to produce graduates who know how to work effectively and respectfully with people across multiple disciplines in ways that will enable us to address these problems, which are thorny, they're complex, They require the exertion of many people from many organizations with many different perspectives, and including from communities, to be able to work together. In other words, I believe that we need to develop models of education that foster transdisciplinary research and collaboration. Likewise, we need to see collaboration across federal agencies to support this critical transdisciplinary research. And I've been heartened by the fact that at least over the last few years, I've seen a lot of progress in that area. And I hope that we'll continue to see that in the future. In closing, we know that over the next few years, there will be a lot of uncertainties. What will be the language that agencies will be allowed to use? What will we need to say in our research abstracts in order to avoid being the target of politicians, as in the past used to happen to researchers in our area? But I also think that we know that we may have these setbacks, but that we are smart, that we are determined, that we will continue to move forward, and we will continue to make progress. As I say, we've come a long way, but there's still a lot of work to be done, and I think we're all ready to do it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jean Goldman. Well said, and I knew that you'd be able to kick this panel off with some truly wonderful insights from your experience and expertise. In the interest of time, we're going to move right into our panel discussion, which will be moderated by Dr. Lucy Hutira. Dr. Hutira is a distinguished professor and chair of the Earth and Environment Department at Boston University. She was named a MacArthur Fellow in 2023 and received the AGU Ascent Award from the Atmospheric Sciences section in 2024. She's an urban ecologist who investigates the impacts of urbanization on carbon cycle dynamics, and we're very fortunate that she'll be moderating our panel discussion here today. So Dr. Hutira, over to you.
Thank you so much. It is such an honor to be able to do this panel with all of you today and to have such a cross-section of federal agencies represented. So I think the best way to start is to meet all of our panelists. And so I will follow the order that you see on the screen. And if each of you can introduce yourselves and the agency that you represent and say a word or two about how your work intersects across this climate and health space. And then we'll move into some additional questions. And if there are questions from the audience, we will collate those and hopefully be able to get to those at the end. So let's start with Barbara Ransom.
It's a pleasure to be here and be able to chat with all of you people online, as well as my friendly panelists here. I'm Barbara Ransom, obviously, and I'm at the National Science Foundation in the Directorate for Geosciences. And I am the lead of something called the Geo Innovation Hub, which creates public-private partnerships between university and industry, as well as helps to help resilience of communities that are facing climate change. And I'm a 20-year veteran of NSF. I've worked interdisciplinary and cross-disciplinary programs, including those in the social, behavioral, and economic sciences, cyber infrastructure, engineering, and graduate education. And really, my goal here in what I do at NSF is to develop interagency partnerships for the agency with a special interest in those that pertain to things like climate and geoscience, workforce, or the engagement of scientists, like I said, with communities to help co-design workable solutions to whatever challenges that they're facing. Right now, I'm leading a charge here for climate change impacts on human health, also known as C2H2, because it's easier to say that than all of those words. And what we're trying to do is expand beyond the geosciences, because that's where it started. But eventually, we hope and we are working to have it encompass all of NSF to potentially engage many of the agencies that you see represented here on this panel. I'd like to have a disclaimer, though, for my comments that are going to follow during the panel, and that these are my own thoughts and developed as a result of the observations and interactions I've had with others, but they are not necessarily those embraced by, at least fully, by my agency. So I just want to put that up on the table.
Thank you, Barbara. Aubrey.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks to GeoHealth and the REACH organization and GeoCAFE for hosting this event. I am Aubrey Miller. I am the Deputy Director of Science Coordination at the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences. In this capacity, I work across agencies. I've been at NIH for about 14 years. Prior was at FDA for a few years, at EPA for a decade, and CDC for about a decade. So I have kind of vast agency experiences. I am currently the co-chair with Josh Rosenthal from Fogarty International Center of our NIH Climate Change and Health Initiative. And this initiative was stood up formally in 3 years ago, in 2021, and now consists of 12 NIH institutes and about 200 staff working group that are focused on climate change and health. The initiative has been really growing as part of the interest across the administration and ability to kind of work together with other agencies. So again, with Barbara and with the other agencies here and with NGOs, we've been trying to develop and foster climate change and health. NIH has had work in this space for over a decade, but really in 2021, we really advanced our efforts. The Climate Change and Health Initiative is focused on reducing health threats across the lifespan, build health resilience in individuals, communities, and nations around the world, especially those among highest risk. The objectives are to identify risks and optimize benefits, the health of individuals and populations from actions to mitigate or adapt climate change, to develop the research infrastructure and workforce to enable generation and timely relevant knowledge drawing from the full spectrum of biomedical disciplines, to leverage partnerships with other scientific and social disciplines and organizations to achieve the most impactful results, and to innovate across research translation continuum to ensure findings are credible, accessible, and actionable for achieving these goals. So with that, we've been busily trying to figure out how to implement those ideas. And with that, we now have 28 research centers, some new funding opportunities, and all sorts of kinds of activities to support, translating this work into action in the US and both globally. So I'll look forward to our discussions as we go through this to talk a little bit more about what we're thinking and how we're trying to implement this with our partners across the continuum. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you, Aubrey. Let's move on to Tom from NASA.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tom Wagner. I'm the Associate Director for Earth Sciences at NASA headquarters, specifically in what we call the Earth Action section. NASA's got a new strategy that we just released. In addition to observing our Earth from space and turning that data into tools and models, we've kind of recognized that we want to use that data to help address societal challenges. And GeoHealth is one of the key things we can do. Some of the stuff I want to tell you about later today, we've got some exciting new missions that can help us answer health questions directly, like the Maya mission that's going to look at pollutants, or the PACE missions, looking at harmful algal blooms. But we've also got training and other tools, right? We've got programs that are called like RSET and Develop that you can look up online. But we've even got direct tools that help us forecast epidemics like cholera and West Nile virus. So looking forward to talking to everybody today.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tom. And I confess, I have all my graduate students start with your RSNet courses to get their feet wet on the data. Monica.
Thanks, Lucy. Hello, everyone. Glad to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I'm Monica Popach. I'm a program manager in NOAA's Climate Program Office, where I'm responsible for a competitive research program, which is focused on air pollution and greenhouse gases. That's the AC4, which stands for Atmospheric Chemistry, Carbon Cycle, and Climate. So health at NOAA, especially in the intersection of geosciences, features in several ways. So NOAA has a One Health program, which convenes experts from across the agencies focused on all aspects of human and ecosystem health. There, I'm the air quality lead for the One Health NOAA group, NOAA One Health group. NOAA is also one of the co-chair agencies for OSTP's Air Quality and Community Health Research Subcommittee, or ACRES. Some of the agencies that are co-chairs, EPA and NIHS, are also here. And through these and other channels, including GeoHealth, NOAA coordinates with other agencies on GeoHealth topics. So it's great to have this interagency discussion. In general, NOAA's mission is to protect life and property. And so we'll do that with in many ways, mostly in providing atmospheric and oceanic measurements, monitoring, modeling, and forecasts. The measurements that Dean Goldman mentioned, Manila, that's, we have a few more decades of those measurements at this point. So some of these products also include operational weather forecasts, air quality forecast guidance, air quality monitoring, harmful algal bloom monitoring, Vibrio forecast, extreme heat forecasts, pollen forecasts, and all kinds of other products, services that hopefully help protect public and also marine ecosystem health. There's a big oceanic component to all that NOAA does. So at the intersection of climate and health, more specifically, just thought I'd mention that one of the large, more recent efforts we have had have been focused on extreme heat, wildfire impacts that were already mentioned. And this is both on fire and smoke warnings. NOAA has a big role in both of these, and also impacts on urban areas, again, at the intersection of climate and health. So there we continue making both ground-based airborne measurements with increasing focus on NOAA satellite data. So hopefully we'll get to the tools discussion later, but that's something that I would like to highlight as well. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Monica. Bryan.
Yeah, so hi. Thanks also to the organizers for the invitation to join the panel. It's a really great group of folks to talk with about climate and health. I'm the National Program Director of EPA's Air, Climate, and Energy Research Program. We have a pretty expansive program that focuses on air pollution, climate change, including both climate change impacts on the environment and public health, as well as our societal responses to climate change, including mitigation, adaptation, and resilience. And then also we look at transitions in the energy system and the impacts those have on human health and the environment. Our research covers pollution sources to impacts of pollution, to solutions to pollution, with a climate change systems focus that highlights the intersections between mitigation, adaptation, and resilience, and that recognizes the links between social and natural systems and determining the causes and consequences of climate change. This is climate change is a cross-cutting issue for EPA, and while a large fraction of our research is carried out through our program in the Office of Research and Development, we also have climate research done throughout other ORD national research programs, as well as in our Office of Air and Radiation and our Office of Policy, which do a lot of work on climate indicators and adaptation. We're a mission-driven research organization with over 1,500 science and support staff conducting research to support our partner organizations within EPA, as well as the needs of states and tribes. While we're not primarily an external research funding program, we do fund research through our Science to Achieve Results STAR program, which also includes several recent climate change topics related to wildfire smoke and energy transitions and vulnerable communities. We're conducting research directly related to climate and health, including a range of animal and human studies looking at extreme heat, as well as interactions of heat and air pollution. We're looking at novel endpoints such as dementia and a variety of reproductive effects. And through partner-engaged solutions-driven research, we're also looking at interventions that can reduce exposures to climate-related stressors, including heat and wildfire smoke, recognizing the importance of linking physical sciences, engineering, medicine, and social sciences to develop effective solutions. EPA is also promoting the use of the One Health approach to account for these clear linkages between environment, animals, and humans in determining public health effects of climate change. And then I'll just end by noting we're also very heavily engaged, as are a lot of our colleagues here, through the USGCRP and the National Climate Assessments, and there's a real growing understanding of the importance of climate and health in those assessments. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Bryan. Geoff.
Thanks very much. I am Geoff Plumlee, Chief Scientist of the U.S. Geological Survey, and I too am honored to have been asked to participate in this group and look forward to the discussions. U.S. Geological Survey, it's also known as the USGS. And although we have geological in our name, we are actually a truly transdisciplinary Earth system science agency. We provide non-regulatory, impartial science to inform policymakers, decision makers, the public, and many others on many of the wicked Earth system challenges that the nation and the world are facing. Climate being one, natural hazards, resources, energy, mineral, water, biological, and things like that. Because we are an Earth system science agency, we employ a truly broad range of disciplines from the Earth, physical, biological, ecological, geospatial, engineering, computer, technology, and social sciences. And we partner with even more disciplines through external collaborations with partners from medicine, public health, and other disciplines. And we also, as others have mentioned, co-produce science with communities that need it the most. And we partner with all of the different agencies that are represented here in terms of federal agencies. For example, I got to know Aubrey way back 24 years ago working on an asbestos issue. And so we are very much appreciative of our great collaborations and partnerships that we have with other federal agencies, state and local agencies, NGOs, academia, and the like. And in terms of climate, we tend to look at climate impacts on the Earth, on human and biological systems, and how humans respond and interact. The USGS has a substantial long-term interest in wildlife health, and so I think we're the primary place within the federal science ecosystem that looks at wildlife health. And so we look at how climate and other things affect, for example, pathogens and other contaminants that might influence the health of fish and wildlife. But also, as Dr. Goldman mentioned, the One Health perspective is very strong. I'll give you a little bit of background about myself. I started out life as a geologist and environmental geochemist, and worked on mining environmental issues, then spent 15 years working on geology and health, looking at the links between the Earth, disasters, geology, human health, and spent 4 years working as Associate Director for Environmental Health before I moved into this job as Chief Scientist in 2020. Or 2019, sorry. So with that, I will give a lot of examples, hopefully in the discussions to come. So thanks very much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jeff. And closing out our introductions, Yulia.
I am Dr. Yulia Caro. I'm the Associate Director for Science for Environmental Health at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And I'm actually very happy that I'm last because I just want to echo what everyone else has said. I know many of the other agencies at the many other agency meetings that we have on climate change, environmental health. Certainly One Health, is like a very common topic for all of us. Something that I want to emphasize for CDC, we are not a funding research agency, but we work close with the communities and the local state and territorial and tribal state health departments. So the work that everyone else does is crucial to make us successful because the information on geohealth, all of the geological, environmental issues, exposures are the ones that also guide the response at the local level, the ways that we can help communities, and of course, the health. So we do collect health information through our surveillance systems, and we have worked for over 15 years to create and to enlarge our tracking database. So it is like a public-facing interface that collects environmental exposure information for many of the agencies. We have many memorandums of understandings and agreements. And then we merge this data with health information, with demographics, with vulnerability, and provide information that is focused, to the local communities, to the public health providers and clinicians. So it's on the side of how we translate and implement the science in practical ways. So again, thank you very much for being here and leading the discussion.
Wonderful, thank you. And it's wonderful to meet all of you. And I just want to encourage everyone in the audience to use the Q&A feature to ask any questions. I'm going to start us off with a few, and as the questions roll in, I'll read some of those. And maybe we can start with Barbara, since you're on the top of my screen, and then I'll ask others to also comment. I wonder if you could say a little bit about what you think are some of the most promising areas for collaboration at this interface of health sciences and geosciences. Are there key themes or maybe methods that are really ripe right now to really make meaningful advances?
Yeah, I think the most promising avenue right now is to really initiate some joint programs with contributions from both medical and health professionals and the non-medical side of the shop. But it may be, ecologists, or it could be geoscientists, because there's really not a lot of that kind of an activity going on so much where it's cross-boundary and where there's federal funding to support that. And so I think having some ability to really increase the interaction between the people that actually work in the environment and understand the environment and all of the triggers that are coming from the environment that cause health conditions is really important. Right now, there's a lot of, the geoscientists doing their thing, the medical people doing their thing. We don't go to each other's meetings. We don't read each other's literature. And so really some of the advances that might happen by understanding what goes on in the environment, as opposed to in terms of how it's causing some kind of a response inside the human body, there's really not a lot of that kind of translation of that knowledge, or the translation of the knowledge back from, we have this health condition and this is what its manifestation is. We think it's caused by this trigger. How can that trigger be mitigated or moderated or predicted better? Or, maybe there's something in the environment we can do that would prevent this from becoming a problem. I think that actually is a really crucial thing that we really need to do to increase collaboration between the sciences. Could be tough because every agency gets its own appropriation. They don't want to give their money to the other agencies, but maybe we can come up with ways that we can jointly share this to really build capacity. And that's what CAFE is trying to do here, which I really like. Trying to, get that conversation going between those non-medical people and the medical people, so that really maybe we can build those bonds and build those relationships that the agencies can then go ahead and find ways that we might be able to fund those collaborations.
Aubrey, do you want to comment a little bit on that? And CAFE and GeoCAFE are great examples of that. Oh, you're muted, Aubrey.
Thanks. My bad. I'll start at the top. Thanks. And just, thinking about some the kind of the bigger area. So, thinking about how climate change is affecting health, right? Both in terms of, how people, get health outcomes from being different exposures, whether it's extreme weather events or the combination of heat and, say, wildfire smoke, et cetera, that may be both acutely and long-term health consequences, but as well as the health outcomes of people that already have pre-existing conditions, are getting treated for, say, cancer, et cetera. How is this affecting their health outcomes? And then again, there's a lot of attention being played, especially at the Department of Health and Human Services, about how the healthcare sector is both contributing to climate change and also part of the consequences of climate change and the infrastructure and how to make that more resilient. So I would say those are some of the kind of the bigger areas. I would say in terms of focusing and thinking about here, these opportunities of geohealth coming together, particularly thinking about interventions and solution-based work, the opportunity to understand how adaptation, whether it's structural, new highways, energies, things that we're doing to change the way people work, the consequences of developing new, battery systems, et cetera. How are those changing our exposures and our health effects? And a lot of this is happening right now. Bryan's here and others, we've been talking about adaptation. We're thinking about how do we understand this? What are the frameworks for measuring it? How do we, and then how do we build on these big projects that are happening all over the country? Large investments by Department of Transportation and other agencies, Department of Agriculture, HUD, et cetera, that are going on across the country, and also adding the health component to these, right? So that's what we're thinking about. That's a big area for us to bring the geosciences, earth sciences, and other groups together, to also with health researchers to start looking at this more. The other part that Lynn hit on so well today is building the transdisciplinary workforce, the capacity building, training of researchers to be able to connect, work together. And then the last piece I would say is the data, and thinking about data integration and how do we take data from, say, atmospheric and geosciences and connect that to health data systems. And I'll come back to that a little bit. So what we have been funding, and just to go to kind of feed to the question here too, is a coordination of centers across the country that now total 21 exploratory research centers that are focused on health and the interface of health, as well as community engagement centers. There's 4 of those that are looking at communities more deeply and creating sustainable platforms with communities. And then there's some partnerships with us and the National Science Foundation, two centers there. And then to coordinate this is CAFE. And so we started CAFE to be our research coordination center, to be the kind of a to bring a community of practice together around these issues, to try to develop it. Who's participating? Who are the researchers, not only in the US, but globally, that are working on these topics? How do we create this forum? And now having the National Science Foundation, Barbara's group, join us to create GeoCAFE, to create, further this issue of opportunity for transdisciplinary work. I'm going to stop there, and I know we're going to go around and have more discussion.
That's great. Maybe jumping off from there, Aubrey, if I could pass it to Tom or Monica to comment a little bit about what you mentioned about the frameworks and tools and our capacity to measure the sorts of changes that are happening, and how do we link that to health outcomes? And either of you is welcome to go first.
I am muted first, so I'll go first. How about that? So, we have some really exciting new tools. Like in 2026, we're launching a satellite called Maya that is going to specifically look at PM 2.5 concentrations in the world's cities. We'll also have some local measurements of what the composition of those particles. And it's even funding work with epidemiologists and local health organizations to specifically look at the human health impacts, respiratory, birth, all those kinds of things. But overall, right, like we see a lot of opportunity for Earth observation data to contribute to things like drivers for climate and environmental pathogens, and also even things like concurrent risks, right? Like, how do you link heat and pathogens, right? Like, what are all the different things going on with heat and air quality that affected human health? I'll throw one other one. There's a couple of opportunities to get involved. We've actually got a health and air quality program that specifically funds work between NASA projects and people at other agencies.
Maybe I can take that excitement a step further. As NASA is developing a lot of satellite data sets and satellite instruments, NOAA is trying to finally transition them to operations. So that one of our excitements is to follow on what the recently, a year ago, launched Tempo, who will have all these wonderful hourly data of air quality and all these great places around the US. We're trying to make that operational maybe about a decade from now. That is the plan. So it will not just be an interesting science experiment here and there, but a sustained effort that the US government will have. And actually, on that note, I can't help thinking. So I guess I didn't mention it. I've been around my program for about 15 years, and one thing I have noticed is the evolution of the research that air quality scientists are doing at these. And just climate in general, going from just measurements, maybe siloed, maybe just more exploratory, to really having this wealth of information right now from various field campaigns, various satellite measurements, various ground-based measurements. So I think it'd be good to do some rethinking of how we coordinate right now. I think that needs to be done more than just more of the science, which of course is very important and I'll continue doing it. But this is where the also coordination activities are coming in. The ACRES group I mentioned, which is Air Quality and Community Health Research Subcommittee, actually evolved from Air Quality Research Subcommittee. So there was already this recognition that we're not just doing air quality, but we need to be more connected with the health community. And this is the kind of things we discuss. What are all these tools we have? I think one of our subgroups actually had a report on not just how do we work with the health with the communities on their air quality issues, but what are all these tools that are available, at least to the U.S. government, to get some organization through all the sometimes chaos of all these wealth of tools that are available to communities. So I guess I'm hoping to just put a plug for more coordination of our activities. There's a lot to coordinate though, and lots to almost rethink of how we partition each agency. And I think this is all what we're getting at with having discussion of more interdisciplinary programs potentially. I don't have any solutions here, but definitely putting a plug for that.
Barbara.
Yeah, I'd like to just mention something is that it would be really great. All of our agencies have various tools, utilities, data sets that are really quite interesting, but it can be difficult for a third party, let's say a municipality or researchers just out there in academia or anywhere, or even companies, to be able to access those. And what would be really great in Barbara's world would be to have an annotated catalog and links to such data in a centralized location, where basically all of that information could be put on a central, let's say, federal government website, or I don't know, it could be a private, private company could do that. So that it really, there's so many fantastic, unbelievable tools like at CDC or at NIH, at who knew, like at places in EPA that really, I think, are underutilized and underknown by people that are doing research in these areas that could really help to accelerate what we're doing. That's all I have to say.
I think that's a perfect transition to Bryan, who has his hand up, but I was going to call on him next anyway to talk a little bit about some of the EPA tools in this space. So Bryan, please.
Yeah, sure. I think speaking to Barbara's, thought to have a centralized place, there are several centralized kind of places where we're supposed to be looking to find these kinds of information, like heat.gov and the climate resilience website. So there's a number of places, but I don't know that they're fully comprehensive, and they're not. It's not easy to maintain them, to make sure they're up to date, that they're linking to all the important resources. So it's a big task to try to do that, but it would be really beneficial. And to add to one particular need related to that. That we've been pushing through some interagency conversations, and Yulia has been involved in it, and Aubrey and others, which is this idea of creating some type of a centralized evidence bank, as well as a place where it can be used to pull together the information that we're learning from these investments that are being made right now in adaptation and resilience, so that it can begin to create a knowledge base that we would then be able to interrogate and to learn from, and to create even more opportunities for solutions. So, and one of the benefits of having that is it gives people who are not in the federal government a place to be able to also share all the information that they're generating in a way that can allow it to gain even more value than it would gain as individual pieces. So this is something we're moving forward with. We're working with the national academies to create an opportunity for investigating this more and working together across our interagency family to be able to try to move forward with this idea. So to me, that's one way to start connecting different pieces, is to create a framework where people can start making those connections happen. So just wanted to put that forward, and also to support a lot of the things that have been said already regarding the importance of being able to take different types of data streams and link them together. A good example where that's happened already, and Aubrey's been really critical in this as well, is on wildfire impacts on health through looking at smoke and how people are exposed and respond to smoke. So there's been a lot of great interagency and interdisciplinary connectivity around that. And there's a growing interactivity that's taking place around prescribed fires, and the need to think about prescribed fires and natural fires as a system of things that we're using to manage the impacts of climate change. So just wanted to put that out there. In terms of some of the types of tools and things, I can post some into the chat, but we have a number of tools that we're developing that are trying to provide the information that can be used by health scientists. We have something called the EDDI, which is our EPA Dynamically Downscaled Ensemble, which is basically taking larger scale climate information coming from the big climate models and creating downscaled data sets of, for example, heat and precipitation in ways that could then be easily or more easily used by health scientists who are looking to try to look at both today's impacts, but also future projections of impacts. We have a number of tools that are, again, bridging functions where it brings together a lot of disciplines. We have a new tool called the Adaptation Organon, which is a system for collecting information and putting it together around decision context, like at the community level, to allow them to make better decisions using all the information from multiple disciplines. So that's something we've been developing. EPA has a suite of different tools, including population projections and ability to look at climate tools through our Global Change Explorer. I'll post these all into the chat for folks who are listening online. And then we have our EnviroAtlas, which collects a lot of different data sources in a geospatial database that has lots of different layers that, again, can be very useful to health scientists. So I'll post these in the website. But again, I think Barbara's point is well taken that not everybody knows where to go for all the various different resources that might be helpful to health researchers. So for me, making those linkages is really important and making it easy to access data by having better metadata, more accessible data formats. And one last thing, and then I'll go on this, which is I also think it's really critical to start directly linking climate information, climate risk information to health systems. And that can be done by linking electronic health record systems directly with climate risk information. I think that's a really powerful way to look at health. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Bryan. Yulia, I'll pass it over to you. Oh, you're muted. There we go.
Thank you so much. I posted just one link to our National Environmental Public Health Tracking Network Data Explorer. But basically, this is the one place where we put as much as possible of our health information and information on environmental exposures collected from other agencies. And our health information comes from our funded grantees, so from local, state, and state health departments, from the labs. We are also incorporating data from NHANES, those measurements from the whole population of different biomonitoring information. We also collect information from other CDC agencies, like, on cancer and other chronic conditions. It's interesting that you mentioned electronic health records, because we have been also exploring those and, trying to incorporate them too. So it's work in progress, but this is like what our one place where it's a lot of work behind the curtains, of translating data from different formats and terminology. But ultimately, we're trying for anyone to be able to pick whatever indicator and measure they want between exposures and health and demographics and vulnerability, even like access to internet, access to medications, anything, healthcare, anything that you can think about, and look at different geographical areas, including at your own zip code, different times, plus modeling data. And probably somebody's going to mention the heat dashboard, but that was like the latest one where we have it as at the zip code level, where you can pull information with recommendations, different recommendations for a person versus a healthcare provider and versus the public health department. So that is, we're working on that, and like any data that you guys can provide, let us know. But if you can share with everyone, or you probably did. Okay, great, thank you.
Wonderful. Aubrey, before I get to you, I'm going to give Jeff a chance
Yeah.
to comment a little bit from the USGS perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Lucy. I just wanted to give a couple of examples to show how science can be used, transdisciplinary science can be used at scales all the way from global down to the individual organism, down to the molecular basis. So a perfect example, another emphasis on the One Health concept. So a perfect example in the current active day is avian influenza virus, and that is a zoonotic disease that has been brought by migrating waterfowl from other continents into the U.S., where those waterfowl interact with both our wild bird population, wildlife, and with domestic animals. And so you've seen a lot in the news about the impacts on poultry operations. And this year was a big emphasis on dairy farms. And then now actually we're seeing transmission first into the dairy farmers, but we're also seeing some very recent cases that don't seem to have a direct connection to dairy farms. So it's a perfect example of linkages between wildlife, the environment, and humans and the health. And where the earth sciences and the biological sciences can play a role is in what are the transmission pathways? How are they waterfowl picking it up? How do they transmit it? For example, it's looking like water might be a viable transmission pathway. Some of our folks seem to have found that there seems to be avian influenza virus that's shed from waterfowl into a water environment can stay viable and transmissive for multiple months. And is that a way? And does it depend on chemistry? Does it depend on temperature? Things like that. And then how do changes in climate influence that? And so that's a really perfect example of how we're all linked together and how we can bring biological tools with our science tools, environmental geochemistry, with mapping tools and all that to understand things that might be tied to climate or a cascading impact of climate, or how climate affects processes that are already happening in the Earth system. Another quick example of work that's been done at USGS recently is using the 50 years of Landsat satellite data in a partnership with NASA to look at how average surface temperatures have changed in different urban areas across the US over time. And you can actually map different neighborhoods and see where that happens. And so you can look at those changes. That can be great information to feed into the public health people to understand what are the parts of particular urban areas that might be more vulnerable. We also have folks that are working on how do you correlate average surface temperature determined by satellite with vegetation types in an urban area, and can you use and what vegetation types actually provide the best mitigation against urban heat impacts. So trees work better than grass, and the effect is most effective in arid urban areas, but also there is some impact in more humid urban areas as well. And then down at the organism scale, one of the topics that I was fortunate to work on with colleagues at the USGS and National Jewish Health Center in Denver is looking at how we can use our earth science characterization techniques, for example, using scanning electron microscopy to understand mineral matter in lung tissue samples from humans that have been provided by biopsy. So we can actually track what have people been exposed to. And then we can work with the pathologists and the pulmonologists to help understand what are the toxicological impacts of those particular exposures. And one study in particular that just a second paper came out over a long-term study was looking at origins of deployment-related respiratory disease and folks coming back from military deployment in the Middle East with high rates of respiratory disease, and how that might tie to geologically sourced dusts. So a few quick examples, thanks.
Wonderful. I'm going to ask a question from the chat, if I could, to Aubrey and to Barbara in particular, but others are also, of course, welcome to answer. There was a question from Ryan Calder saying that he completely agreed with Barbara Ransom's characterization of the gaps between earth science and health research. but he has often been discouraged from posing health-centric hypotheses in NSF proposals, and with the inverse also being true for NIEHS, which maybe has a perception of not really wanting to fund geosciences, but rather focus on the health sciences. And so I think this is a great question, and I'd love to hear thoughts from each of you about advice for researchers on how if you're applying to some of the core programs at NIH and at NSF, how do we advance more interdisciplinary thinking in this space? And Barbara, you were nodding a lot, so I'm going to let you go first.
Yeah, let me go first. I blame my own agency for causing some of this problem in that, yes, in the past, anybody who came to us, even though they were doing science in the non-medical related field, but let's say the motivation was some kind of a health issue, as opposed to, fundamental theoretical knowledge in that discipline or whatever. Yes, people were stiff-armed most of the time. However, I have to say there's been kind of a ground swell and a change inside the agency in that even just this last summer, a missive came out from our director's office that said that, NSF actually does support or should support in the core programs work in these non-medical disciplines that have a motivation that focuses on some kind of a health issue. Okay, so we now have official guidance, because in the past it was all just sort of word of mouth as to, what do you fund and what don't you fund? That passed down from, generations of program officers to the new people that come in there, which was that, yes, anything that smacked of human health should be funded at NIH somewhere. And so that worm has kind of turned, and we actually do have a number of activities that we collaborate with NIH and other health organizations. For example, Oceans and Human Health. That's an actual program that we have going on with Aubrey's NIEHS. There's also something called the evolution and ecology of infectious diseases, which is not, it's focused on what's going on to promote, let's say, different kinds of transmission and changes in transmissions, or what are the mechanisms of transition of sort of non-human systems to infectious diseases, and how those are motivated with time. And we actually have a collaboration with China, the UK, and Israel, and also USDA with that. And we also have something called Smart and Connected Communities, and also something called the Civic Innovation Challenge. And both of those programs actually allow health-related or focused activities to be proposed there. They're both coming out of the computer science director, but any discipline is welcome to participate in those. And there's also one that is more data-related, which is Smart Health and Biomedical Research in an Era of AI and Advanced Data Science. So the NSF is actually moving in that direction. Now, our focus is always going to be on funding the scientist and the kind of science that's non-medical. But if the goal is to actually provide insights and maybe deliverables in the health field, then that's good. And actually, I run a program that just started a couple of years ago called Climate Change Impacts on Human Health. And in that, it's just for capacity building right now. And this is one reason why we've helped to fund the CAFE work with NIEHS, is that really it's to require that the non-medical people, and in my case, since the money comes from the geosciences, geoscientists who are actually going to collaborate, interact with, or partner with people who are actual medical or health professionals, so that whatever work they're doing in the environment is focused on a medical problem that happens in human beings, and that they're working directly with practitioners in the medical and health field, so that you can translate that result directly into the field where it can be used as quickly as possible, as opposed to just publishing it in your geoscience literature and then hoping somebody in the medical field is going to read that literature, which they probably won't. So Things are changing at NSF. It's still pretty new, at least in terms of having official guidance from up above in the agency about the importance of non-medical fields in the geosciences also, working to help with this whole issue, especially with regard to climate change impacts on human health. So I highly recommend that if you are interested in doing something like that, let's say you're a geoscientist, to contact the core program that if you're a hydrologist, you'd contact hydrological sciences, or if you're a chemical oceanographer, you'd contact chemical oceanography, whatever it is, and say, hey, I want to do a research project, but, I want to focus on really bringing new information and knowledge of filling a gap or helping solve a problem that's a human health problem. So I hear that NSF now is receptive to funding that. Is my idea going to be discriminated against? See, this way you're pushing those program officers to realize that their community truly wants to work in this transdisciplinary space and wants to collaborate with people in the health and the medical field, because it's raising, the knowledge inside the agency of the people who actually give out the money and sort of indoctrinate their panelists and their reviewers to the reality that their people want to do this kind of work. And I'll turn it over to Aubrey to address his perspective from the medical side.
Yeah, thanks,
Thank you.
Barbara. And picking up where Barbara was going. Yeah, it's been thinking through, where do we want to go, right? So how do we get there? How do we use the mechanisms that we have? Clearly, AGU, AMS, and other societies have been pushing us to be able to fund, be able to build. If you look at the NIH Climate Change and Health Initiative, it's kind of a big cogwheel. It has kind of 9 areas of science and has kind of 4 areas in the center, including interventions and equity, etc. But the center of it, the center of the hub, is really transdisciplinary, transformative research. And it's really the essence of what we're trying to build, especially if we're going to get to solutions-based work. How do we actually build that capacity building and try to create an opportunity for the scientists to come together to actually learn and actually build careers going forward, and getting away from the kind of the stovepiped way we've been funding and the way that all of our academic community continues to be set up as well. With that said, Barbara mentioned some of the activities that we've had that were traditional, like our centers, ocean centers that were across our agencies. But now we also have funded 2 centers that are within NSF that were focused on disasters, right? So these centers had traditionally been working on disasters related to NSF, part of the NHERI system. And one is at the University of Colorado, which had been doing rapid awards post-disasters that's supposed to really focus on socio-behavioral science for the most part, but we've now given them money from the NIH Climate Change and Health Initiative to allow the health research community to get rapid awards, to be able to collect data post-event. And also we're hoping to encourage those collaborations that will get the monies, work together, come together, and then apply for larger grants, whether it's R21s in our case, or R01s, or et cetera. The other part of the we're funding too is with the University of Washington Rapid Center, led by Joe Wortman's group there. And this has been funded by NSF for a number of years, and to provide tools, instrumentation, and training resources to the geosciences and community and at large, so they can collect data. So they have that. So now NIH is funding them to give them tools and resources for exposure and health data. So again, hoping to, hey, go get some money from, rapid monies, wherever you can get it from, the Natural Hazard Center, or, through our grants, which are not quick, or NSF's grants, which are much better, in terms of getting money, and especially in response to these climate-related disasters that we're seeing, increasing frequency and severity. So now we are funding them, and they will be standing up and starting to provide resources in the coming months. And a lot of this, there'll be a number of discussions at AGU. So I encourage folks that if you're going to AGU, there'll be a number of sessions and discussions around these new resources. So we're excited about that. And again, as Barbara mentioned, we're thinking about ways that we can try to align funding, co-funding, et cetera, to continue to encourage this. We are having these conversations on the backside, and not just with agency, but also with the NGO community, Wellcome Trust, and others. I will draw folks' attention to a new notice of special interest that we put out a week ago on implementation science at NIH, which again is focused on early warning systems, water systems, etc. Implementation that's going out now to create some funding that would be ripe for transdisciplinary work. Also, the cafe is really a hub, right? So we're funding them, and now that with NSF funding, but to create some transdisciplinary work across all these differing centers to bring people together. And the last thing I wanted to highlight, and I know we started talking about, was the data and the data integration component of this, which is a really cool opportunity to bring folks together. And there's been a discussion about how do we bring that environmental geospatial data to health data systems. We actually started this as a federal working group. I partnered with NASA to have a working group that a number of all these agencies here were part of under a White House working group that also had academia, and now is funded by the Department of Health and Human Services to help us build this forward. How do we build the resources for the research community to integrate environmental climate data with health data? If you want to I put it in the link, but it's NIH CORDS, Climate and Health Outcome Research Data Systems. You can just Google NIH CORDS. You can find it, but we now have a catalog that compares EPA, NOAA, NASA data sets with metadata a lot there. We're also producing tools that allow people to then take climate data from NASA and others, and EPA, et cetera, and be able to put it into a data model that will then ingest it and kick it out in ways that it can be used for integration with health data. So we're working on tools and resources. It's all open source. It's all trying to build. And of course, CAFE, our partner, has a large data component, and they are also doing putting a place in for research for the data sets, to combine data sets to go into Harvard Dataverse, places for this. NSF funds Design Safe, another large place for data sets. So we are trying to put all this together. So I would encourage folks here to look at both the CAFE data components and look at our CORDS data components, and you'll start to see some nice evolving opportunities in this space.
Yeah, I just want to play a little bit off what Aubrey said, especially for those geoscientists out there. NSF has a very, I would say, you can get some significant money for rapids, I think up to 300K. And so if there's something like Lahaina, the wildfire in Lahaina, or like the New Palestine train crash and all of that, toxic material that got put out into the environment, if you want to come to NSF to do the geoscience aspect of that, and let's say you got a partner with some people over there in the medical and the health field, you could come in with like companion like rapids that would be really quite substantial, that would allow you to go out there and collect the environmental data, whatever that might be. And you'd have your companion group that would be the people that are being funded by the NIH rapid aspect, to be able to really put those things together at the same time. So you're collecting that ephemeral data right after that accident happened. So keep that in mind. That's something that we had never really considered that much before, and putting a health spin on that, and also partners that are coming from the health and medical field would really be quite powerful. So just keep that in mind. We have money, and we would love to be able to fund some partners like that.
Super. There was a great follow-up question to this that I'm going to open to anyone or everyone to quickly respond on the panel, which is thinking about workforce development. And are there opportunities where there are many opportunities that are really targeting early career scientists. But I wonder if there are particular opportunities within your agencies and offices for more experienced and mid-career scientists to try to engage at this intersection of climate and health. And I would love a rapid fire, if I could, set of responses on this, because we've actually gotten some really great questions and comments that I want to get to.
I'll give you one quick one. We have a new Climate and Health Scholars Program. It's actually the third class now at NIH. It has 13 new people, and a lot of them are geoscientists from across the country, and that are working with NIH staff and teams to develop climate change and health. So that will be up again. We just filled this year's class, but we'll repost that again in the coming days. But I would encourage folks to look up the NIH Climate Change and Health Scholars Program, which is one way that we're trying to bring in more senior level folks to work on climate change and health, and with NIH staff and others to try to promote it, including webinars, etc.
Super, Tom.
Yeah, so we've got a couple things specifically for training. There's the RSET program, ARSET, and we'll put a link in the chat. We have another, and they have some health-related trainings there. We have the Develop program, where anybody, could be private sector at any stage in their career, can sign on to join and test a project at a NASA center, working with some experts to help them really prove it up. And then we have our other programs, right? Like I said, we have the Health and Air Quality program and a range of other programs that people can apply to for direct funding for grants. And again, we take people at other agencies as well.
Wonderful. Barbara.
Yeah, I have to say, I am loving that Develop program over at NASA. I was super impressed by that, and it has actually quite a large both ecosystem and geoscience component to it. I can't say enough about how much I've loved that program.
You should come to the Develop project.
I'm hoping that we might be able to join you with it. Then also, there's something at NSF called GOALI. Okay, now this is for, and there's also something called mid-career. It's a mid-career funding opportunity. So let's say you're in your middle of your career, and you're, let's say, an associate professor, or you just got tenure or something like that. And you want to change the direction of the kind of research that you do to become more relevant, to maybe have higher impact. That's someplace where you could come in with sort of a medically focused kind of an approach to your NSF core program. You can either come in, if you already have an active NSF award, you can actually come in with a supplement to that award, so up to 20% of whatever your base cost is on that award, and say, hey, I want to actually go and work with some health medical professionals, some hospital, I don't know, some medical group, some, NIH researchers, and I want to take what I'm doing in my proposal to NSF, which is not medically related, but I want to find a way that I can actually work with them to sort of translate some of the information that I found to help them solve their medical problems. So there's supplements to your NSF award that are possible for that. There's also a suite of activities through the Climate Change Impacts on Human Health Dear Colleague letter. So just Google DCL space C2H2 space NSF, and that'll come up. I run that. And also, like I say, the GOALI program, that's for so if you're a faculty member and you want to work with a non-academic institution, like you want to work with some kind of a company, and there are plenty of companies in the biomedical and the medical space or hospital groups, you can propose to do work in that area. Like you could come as a normal proposal to a core program. But when you're going to do goalies, you should always contact the core program first and just pitch the idea about what you want to do and say hey, I want to supply, I want to submit to the goalie program. Is that okay? For some of these, because it's so new inside NSF, for sort of the core programs, especially in the geosciences, I would definitely recommend that you contact them first, let them know what you want to do, why you want to do it, and that you want to use this vehicle, and then see if they would support it before you write a proposal. But the things are changing at NSF because we are looking for higher impact science. We are looking for more visibility for the people that do that science. And, there's not too much that's more visible than saving people's lives in the US or abroad. So think about
Great.
that.
If I can ask Barbara and Tom in particular, if you could drop a couple of links in the chat for the goalie and for the develop program, I think that would be fantastic.
I'll try to do that.
And I will point out that we will save the chat and circulate all of these incredibly rich links and discussion that's happening there. So it will be available after. I'm going to ask one more question, and I will open this up to anyone about from the Q&A, which is about disaster and emergency management. And absent from this panel is FEMA. And I wonder if there are thoughts and comments about opportunities at this kind of emergency space of what we can do beyond the rapids that Barbara had already mentioned to accelerate collaboration and learning. I think Tom went up first. Bryan.
I'll just mention, we have a Homeland Security research program that includes quite a bit on disaster resilience and response, and I think that that's an area that really does call on multiple disciplines to be able to inform. And we have both our physical scientists who work on sort of how do you do cleanups right after a flood or right after a fire event, and we also have social scientists working, for example, to develop tools for how to make sure that people are able to respond properly after a flood or another contamination event, so they can make sure that as they're cleaning up, they're not exposed to additional chemical contaminants and so forth. So I do think that's an area that is active research for EPA, and it's very closely coordinated with other parts of the Homeland Security Office, including FEMA. But I think in terms of preparing ourselves to be ready and opportunistic, part of it is, like, for example, for us, it's having quality assurance plans in place so that we can take portable equipment or mobile equipment and get it out very rapidly. And it's also working to develop better relationships between FEMA and the other agencies so that we can't just go into a post-disaster situation without coordinating with FEMA and having those understandings set up ahead of time so they know what capacities we have, so that we can get out there and do the monitoring that's necessary to be able to know where there's a problem and what we can do about it. That's something we can, I think, improve over time. But I do think, again, we've got now the types of equipment, we've got drone technologies, we've got mobile platforms that can help us get to those disaster areas quickly, and be able to take some of the samples that allow us to develop better interventions. So I think that's an area that'll continue to grow.
Great. So we are running short on time, but I want to give everyone a last word. Tom, did you want to add to this?
Just super briefly, right? First thing, we try to help, and we work closely with FEMA, try to help the community ahead of time to understand the risks. Then right before the event, we try to do a forecast. Like with recent Hurricane Helene, we did a landslide forecast. Then there's the kind of post-event and recovery, like how do you guide first responders? And then for health, we produce tools like the cholera risk forecast, where you take climate information from the local area and combine it with epidemiology and other things.
Great. Monica, I think you were next.
Sure. Yeah, NOAA has no FEMA either, but we do have a mandate to provide all kinds of forecasts for hurricanes, for all kinds of disasters. We have actually a hazard mapping system that's for fire and smoke, so that's also operational. And we also have, in terms of response, we have the high split model that's lives at NOAA for all kinds of chemical fires, oil spills, disaster scenarios, like nuclear events and things like that. So NOAA does have a mandate for all those kinds of pre and post disaster forecasting.
All right, Jeff.
Yeah, the USGS has a lot of different activities related to disaster responses. And actually, there's also very useful disaster scenarios where we anticipate what are the cascading impacts of potentially of plausible future disasters that are on the high end of the scale. And so the arc storm scenario for a California atmospheric river event, shakeout earthquake scenario, tsunamis. We have a risk community of practice that helps in communication. And things like landslide hazards program has been working very heavily in the affected areas of North Carolina with the state and the other federal agencies on landslides. We also have flood mappers and many different things, partnering again with many different agencies that all provide information that can be linked to what might be important for human health. And then we also do quite a bit of what are the environmental issues that have developed as a result of particular disasters, and how can lessons learned from those be applied to future disasters. Thanks.
Wonderful. And I am running really short on time. Aubrey, do you have a super quick comment?
I'll just give you a super quick one. So in addition to the centers that I mentioned with Barbara, we do have a time-sensitive grant program. It's a little bit slower than Barbara's in terms of the NSF, but there is that. And I would just encourage folks to Google NIH DR2, Disaster Research Response Program, which is a core element of our climate change and health initiative.
Wonderful. So I want to say my thank you to all of these incredible panelists. This has been such a fun and rich discussion, and the chat has been one of the most productive that I've ever seen. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Greg Wallenius.
All right, great. Thank you, everybody. And let me echo my thanks to the panelists. This has been just a fantastic discussion. Thank you to my co-organizers, Susan Annenberg, Lucy Hutira. Thank you to Dean Goldman for joining us and speaking. And thank you to a number of staff members that really do all the heavy lifting behind the scenes. So thank you all for bringing this together. I did want to just take a second to highlight the GeoCAFE Research Coordinating Center of the NIH Climate Change and Health Initiative, which was mentioned several times. The GeoCAFE stands for Convene, Accelerate, Foster, and Expand the Community of Practice. So really, we are a center that tries to enable and accelerate the pace of research and translation in this space. And those activities are, one of the highlights of what we do is an upcoming virtual conference. This is coming, we had a very successful one in February of this year, and we'll have the next one in March. We invite you to submit sessions for this. Last time we had, I think it was about 900 people participating in at least one session. So we really want this to be an organic, community-led event. So please submit your sessions or session ideas for this. The work of GeoCAFE is supplemented or augmented by funding from NSF, as Barbara mentioned, and the GeoCAFE is a research coordinating center, research coordination network that tries to build on the activities of GeoCAFE to make sure that we're really being more thoughtful and effective in bringing together folks from the geosciences and the health sciences. And we just middle of last week, we had our first GeoCAFE cohort meeting. We funded 12 individuals to attend a conference outside of their own domain. So we have the health scientists. Many of them will be attending AGU next month in Washington, D.C. Others will be attending AMS. And vice versa. Many of those that we funded from the geosciences either attended the International Society for Exposure Sciences or will be attending the upcoming International Society for Environmental Epidemiology meeting coming up next summer in Atlanta. So that's, again, how we're trying to facilitate those conversations. For this audience, I just wanted to highlight a couple events at AGU. So on December 9th, that's the Monday, please join us first at a town hall event that's going to continue the conversation from here. And there's going to be some of the same folks from this panel as well as others speaking there. And then please join us afterwards for a network event co-hosted by the GeoHealth section of AGU, Susan Annenberg's team, and GeoCAFE and GeoCAFE. And then you can see there's additional receptions and networking opportunities throughout the week. Of course, there's many more events, but these are some of the ones I wanted to highlight to hope to see you there in person. And with that, I'm going to thank you again for your wonderful participation and for the panelists for joining us and dedicating their time today. And we look forward to additional sessions. If you have ideas of an event you'd love to see, just please send any of us an email, any of us on the organizing team, and we'll do our best to accommodate in the near future. So with that, yeah, I think we'll end it there. Thank you very much, everybody.